How's it going, Star Wars fans? Welcome back to Star Wars Doctrine, where we talk about all of our favorite things from our favorite galaxy far, far away. If you haven't already, please do be sure to subscribe and like so that you can see more future Star Wars content. Also, don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Instagram, where you can take part in the discussions and have a chance to be featured on the podcast. A lot of the stuff that we talk about on here comes directly from your guys' comments and suggestions on there, so be sure to check it out. I'm super excited about this week. I got my Darth Vader socks on, and I'm excited to talk about some Star Wars, so let's dive right into it, guys. One thing that we talked about that I thought was really fun, maybe you guys have heard of it before, maybe the first time you've heard of it was when I posted it, but George Lucas's original script for Star Wars was actually titled The Adventures of Luke Starkiller, as taken from the Journal of the Whills. Just to clarify, I had heard plenty of times that Luke Starkiller was his first name. I didn't realize, although I've heard of the Whills, I didn't realize that that was originally in the title, as taken from the Journal of the Whills. So I found that very interesting. He originally intended, George originally intended for the story to be told by mysterious or even godlike beings called the Whills. So the Whills, if you haven't heard of them, or if you have and just need a refresher, the Whills were this idea George had when he started Star Wars. He originally thought that the Star Wars story would be told by these beings who had maybe either witnessed everything that went on in the galaxy, or they were like the gods of the Force almost, but they were aware of everything that was going on, and they were telling us the story of Luke Starkiller, who obviously became Luke Skywalker, and all of the adventures that happened. They were actually being told to us by these Whills, and if you think about it, it makes sense, because all the opening crawls say a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, so obviously we wouldn't be being told this by Luke himself or any of the Jedis. It had to have been by someone who had witnessed it or recorded it. And so apparently George Lucas scrapped this idea because he didn't think that it would sit as well with fans as just saying this happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away would. And I think he took the right approach, although the Whills are something that are very mysterious, very interesting to learn about, because I will say this, they are canon for a lot of reasons, a lot of different ways that they've become canon over the years, especially since Disney has taken over. They've subtly hinted a lot that the Whills are canon and that there's more to learn about them. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about here. Unfortunately, there's just so much mystery around the Whills and what they are and what they do, but like I said, they're more of these godlike beings who are separate from mortal beings. They aren't alive the same way that Luke and Vader and all of these guys are. They're above that when it comes to the Force. Some people have speculated that they are just another term for the cosmic force, or that they either are really in touch with the cosmic force, or that they control the cosmic force, or that they are the cosmic force. Lots of speculation on that. We don't ever really get a description of what the Whills look like, or if they have bodies, or if they're more just like substances of the force. We don't really know for sure, but that's the idea, is that they're separate from mortal beings like our main characters in the story. But yeah, so like it's titled, it says that these stories came from the Journal of the Whills. So I want to talk a little bit about what the Journal of the Whills is. And the Journal of the Whills was not necessarily canon for a while. Even in the expanded universe, it was hinted at a lot, but it actually became canon first in the novelization of Episode 7, The Force Awakens. It actually opens with a line quoted from the Journal of the Whills. So that's the first official canon reference we have of it. Episode 8 ends up in the novelization quoting from the Journal of the Whills as well. So Disney has really been hinting at it a lot. And that kind of gets me excited to think that whether it's in the movies, whether it's in comics, or TV shows that we are probably going to learn a little bit more about it, which I find super interesting. So the Journal of the Whills was an ancient book that had a record of all that went on in the universe. A keeper of the Whills was tasked with making entries into the journal and recording all that happened. It was also filled with knowledge of the Force. So it's a book that has record of everything. It's almost like the Bible in a way, or a sacred text to the Jedi of the histories of the galaxy, everything involving the Force, everything that's ever happened. And so it's very sacred. It's even talked about that for a time, people obsessed over hoping that something they did in their lifetime would make it into the Journal of the Whills, because that would mean that they would be remembered forever and that their legacy would live on and that they did something important with their life, which is really kind of a cool way to look at it. Which I also found that kind of interesting too, because the way the journal sounds, it's like a record that not everyone has access to. So it kind of makes you wonder why they'd be so obsessed with being in it if not everyone's going to read it, like it's not a common history book like we learn about in school. But still, it was an important record that people, at least people who are in touch with the Force, were aware of. Maybe not so much people who didn't have knowledge of the Force. Maybe they weren't into it as much or didn't even know that it existed. But yeah, so Qui-Gon Jinn actually, if you've seen the Clone Wars series cartoon, Qui-Gon Jinn actually claims that to Yoda, back up real quick, Qui-Gon is the first person we know that finds out how to keep himself, finds the pathway to immortality, if you will. He learns how to let his consciousness be one with the Force. He's the first one that discovers basically the pathway to becoming a Force ghost. Although Qui-Gon doesn't quite complete his training to become a Force ghost himself, he's able to manifest his voice through the Force, which he's able to speak out to Yoda and help Yoda be able to go through some of the same training that he did so that Yoda can learn how to become a Force ghost. This is actually something that was going to originally be written into the episode 3 Revenge of the Sith movie. It's actually in the script that Yoda was going to hear Qui-Gon's voice. There's even a deleted scene where Yoda does. And then supposedly it wasn't filmed, but they were going to go into more depth where Qui-Gon was going to teach Yoda how to manifest himself through the Force after death. The Clone Wars cartoon goes into it a little bit. We see Yoda actually follows Qui-Gon's voice, goes to a different planet. Qui-Gon tells him that he's learned how to manifest himself through the Force from a shaman of the Whills, and also from the priestesses, the Force priestesses. And he sends Yoda to be able to meet these Force priestesses who manifest themselves as 5 separate beings. And they kind of give this like ancient Greek version of the Fates, if you will. They're just very wise, very in tune with the Force, these creatures who teach Yoda, start to teach him about the Force and how he can learn to become one with the Force. And this is totally new to Jedi. That, as far as we know, this hasn't been discovered in the past, at least in canon. And Qui-Gon was the first, so Yoda then goes to Obi-Wan in episode 3 at the end, and he says, there's more training I have for you. This makes it into the movie, obviously. He says, your old masters visited me from the other side of the Force. And Obi-Wan then's like, Qui-Gon, all surprised. And we know that Obi-Wan goes to Tatooine and learns a lot from Qui-Gon. And eventually he learns how to become one with the Force as well, which is why we see him and Yoda die in the same way, where they disappear and become one with the Force. And then again, we see Luke do that as well at the end of The Last Jedi. So the Whills are very interesting, and I think it's something that we're going to continue to explore. The chances of this mention of the Whills being in episode 9, I actually think is pretty high. I'm not gonna lie. I really do, because, well, I just think that we're gonna get Force Ghost Luke. I'm crossing my fingers, because it seems like Mark Hamill's done a lot of shoots and he's gonna have a major role in this. And the only way I can imagine that is as a Force Ghost. We got to see Yoda as a Force Ghost in episode 8, and I think that these Force Ghosts are just getting more and more powerful. At first, it was just a manifestation by Qui-Gon of his voice. Then Yoda and Obi-Wan became ghosts. Then we see in episode 8, Yoda actually controls lightning and lights a tree on fire. And Luke really discovered one of the most powerful Force techniques, maybe the most powerful Force technique known to any Jedi, when he Force projected himself. And that just goes to show how powerful Luke was with the Force. And if he was that powerful in his mortal body with the Force, it makes you think that if Yoda can strike lightning to a tree, maybe Luke will discover something more than that. Maybe we'll get to see that. Maybe his power will transfer over into him being one with the Force. Maybe he'll be the most powerful Force ghost ever. I don't know. To me, you got to be careful with that, because you don't want it to make it weird or lame or just spooky ghost stuff. But I think that there's a way that JJ could explore that and make it fun, make it new, show Luke's power, because we all want to see Luke being a bad A in episode 9. Coolest part of episode 8 was when he withstood all those blasters from the walkers and lived, and we were like, holy crap, that's Luke, he's powerful. So I'd love that to be something we get in episode 9. Maybe we'll get to explore the netherworld of the Force, the beyond the grave side of the Force. Maybe we'll get to see it from Luke's point of view, where we get to see into the cosmic Force, and who knows, maybe he'll be able to shed some more light on what the Whills are, and maybe we'll get to learn a little bit more about that and about the secrets of the Force, things that we don't know. JJ has said that he's going to change the way we view the Force and understand the Force, and I'm hopeful that it could have something to do with the Whills and Luke and being one with the Force. I think that would be something really cool to explore, for sure. Got a comment from, let's see, I think I was on Instagram and Reddit. We had a comment on the Whills. Someone actually mentioned that they had heard Yoda's species was actually the Whills. And I'm glad someone brought this up. Actually, more than one person did, excuse me. There was someone on Reddit who said it as well, that Yoda was a Whill. And this is actually a fan theory from a long time ago, that Yoda was a Whill, because we really don't know much about his species, what they are, and where they're from, and everything. But it was a really cool theory, I thought, but it has been proven that it's not canon. It's been stated that Yoda was not a Whill. That's why he ends up learning from the Whills, or the shaman of the Whills and the Force priestesses, because he's not a Whill. So that's actually not something that's canon. It was just a theory, but an interesting one for sure. The Whills are totally something separate from mortal beings, like we said, and so not Yoda. But one thing that's interesting, there is a person, actually two people, who were in connection with the Whills that we do know that are in canon. If you remember in Rogue One, our blind friend, let's see here, we had Sharut and Baze. Baze is the blind friend's guard who saves him from all those stormtroopers, and they have that fun little exchange. The two best friends there, they were actually guardians of the Whills, and it's actually said in Rogue One. I had to go back and watch it. Cassian Andor says, when Jin asks who they are, he says they're guardians of the Whills, protectors of the Kyber Temple. And they're very Force-sensitive human beings. They're in touch with the Force. They are not Jedis, which a lot of people speculated he could be a Jedi, but he's just a Force-sensitive person and he has some sort of connection to the Whills. He is called a guardian of the will. What that means, we don't know 100%. We do know that the Kyber Temple was a sacred place for Jedi, and probably to the Whills as well, since Kyber crystals are force-sensitive tools that the Jedi and Sith as well used. This temple, I would love to learn more about this temple on Jeddah, but the Guardians of Whills, this religious order, they're resisting the Empire taking stuff from their temple because this temple was sacred to them. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that we can learn there. But yeah, so these were actually protectors, guardians of the Whills. So they had some connection with the Whills that we don't 100% know all about. But once again, something that possibly could be explored. We know, so there's the Whills themselves. There was guardians of the Whills. We had shamans of the Whills who were basically tasked with, shamans and keepers of the Whills, which who were tasked with writing in the journal of the Whills and keeping the record of everything for the Whills. And we also had the Force priestesses who were in connection with the Whills. All of these are just very Force sensitive people who have some connection to these Whills and some deeper connection with the Force than your average person. Something that is really interesting. George Lucas actually came out and said around, I think, episode 8, that he had plans for the sequel trilogy to be revolving around the Whills of the Force. So his idea for 7, 8, and 9 was going to really dive into the Whills of the Force, what their role was, the guardians, the shamans, the keepers of the Whills, all of that. Even he said he wanted to dive more into midichlorians. And he actually said that he thinks Disney's probably doing something that fans like more because he thinks fans would have hated his version of diving into the Whills because of how many people hated the midichlorians in episode 1. If you hate midichlorians or if you don't, basically the idea was that in the original trilogy, the Force felt very, anyone could become a Jedi if, it was more like a religion. And then people really hated in episode 1 how George said, oh, well, actually, these midichlorians are what make you Force sensitive. And Anakin has a ton of them, and that's why he's Force sensitive. It's not because he just learned the ways of the Force, and it wasn't as mystical, I guess. It was more scientific. But I personally, I'll say it, I actually don't hate midichlorians. I really don't. I think that there's a way they can both exist, both sides of it, the mystical, the spiritual, the magic of the Force, and the midichlorians. Because you look at Luke's time, there was hardly any Jedi alive, and he was this new hope for them, and of course it felt mystical. He was pretty much the only one. I mean, when Obi-Wan dies, we're thinking Luke's literally Luke and Yoda, and then when Yoda dies, we're thinking Luke's the only Jedi left. So if he's the last Jedi, obviously it's magical and mystical. He's the only one in the entire galaxy. But then you go back into the prequels, and you have tons of Jedi. There are thousands across the galaxy. There has to be a way for the Jedi Order to decide who they're going to train. I mean, you can't just expect that anybody who wants to sign up for the Jedi Order can, and we'll test them and we'll let them try and be a Jedi. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. They had to have some way to decide who was worth their time training, And midichlorians were one way that they could tell based on looking at what you had inside of you, your anatomy, I guess. If you had these midichlorians, more of them, then the more likely you were to be in tune with the Force. I think that's widely misinterpreted because I don't think that it means people couldn't use the Force or couldn't be how should I say this? Couldn't believe in the Force, couldn't act through the Force. Heck, we know there was a church of the Force, people who really believed in the Jedi's ways, and obviously the Force connected everything. There's plenty of people in the galaxy who probably acted through the Force or with the Force without being Jedis. So, then you have people like Han Solo who are anti the Force, didn't believe in it, but end up believing in it. And you can't tell me that Han Solo probably didn't have the Force with him at some points. So there's definitely room for both, in my opinion. Sorry, that's my little tangent I didn't plan on going on, but I think that George, like he said, George Lucas wanted to explore that more in 7, 8, and 9. And I like that Disney has put little pieces in the sequels, maybe to pay tribute to George and what he wanted to do with them. And that's why part of me thinks that it's gonna make its way into the sequel trilogy with Episode 9, because I think that's what George wanted. And maybe it won't be all about that. It might be a small part of it, but I think we're gonna get more of it. I think it's interesting stuff. I think Rey and Kylo are both gonna learn more about the Force, and as an audience, I think we're gonna learn more about the Force that we didn't know or didn't understand. Which, anytime you can learn more about Star Wars, I'm in. That's exciting. So, expanding the universe is awesome as long as it's stuff that the fans are gonna like. So obviously JJ's gonna be walking on eggshells here, but I think he'll do well, as I've said many times. Let's see here. So the last little bit I want to talk about with the Whills. Sorry, we're talking a lot about those today. It's just so interesting. But one of my favorite facts, and one of your guys' favorite facts, as you clearly said in a lot of the comments. Let's see here. And this is, by the way, 100% according to George Lucas. It's actually on Star Wars' website, so I'm going to go ahead and say that that's enough for me to say it's canon until we hear otherwise from Lucasfilms. But here it goes. Around 104 ABY, after the Battle of Yavin, the astromech droid R2-D2 told the story of the Skywalker's family exploits to a keeper of the Whills, focusing on the Clone Wars Galactic Civil War, and this is how the Skywalker saga came to be in the Journal of the Whills. Wow. Mind blown. R2-D2 is the narrator of Star Wars. That's so cool. He literally is the reason that we know the Skywalker story. And this sparked some awesome comments. People loved it. I loved it. I think that's so cool because R2 is such a big part of the trilogies. To find out that he lives well on past past episode 9, 104 ABY. I think Last Jedi is like 40-ish years or 30-ish, 38, 39, something like that, years past the Battle of Yavin. So this is 100 years, 104 years in the future from then. And R2's still alive, and he has pretty much been there through everything. So him recounting it to a keeper of the Whills, someone that writes in the Journal of the Whills, is something that is really cool, sparks my interest. I want to talk about one of the comments on here. Put it to the max on Instagram said, at the start of every film, it says a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. What if the keeper of the Whills are telling the story and R2-D2 is the sole reason we know the story? So just like what Lucas said, you look at the crawls that we get. What if this is summaries that R2 gave or the Whills gave, and it's all from the mind or the circuits of R2-D2 and him recounting the story to us? That's so cool. I had a Redditor comment. Let's see. King Lucent, he said, this could be a great way to end the Skywalker saga. R2 sharing the story in the future as we cut to a montage of peace and purpose throughout the galaxy. I couldn't agree more with that. How cool would that be that we get like a little epilogue of R2 and he's telling the story to the Whills, or the keeper of the Whills, and they're writing in the journal, and we find out that that's exactly how we got to know the entire saga of the Skywalkers, and that's where everything came from. Also had a funny thought that I put in the caption here. What if the reason that R2-D2 is always saving the day and C-3PO just seems to be annoying and kind of in the way a lot of times is because R2 is the one telling the story? Maybe he's just making himself look better because, I mean, wouldn't you? If you were telling the story, you got to get in there, right? Get in the highlights, because isn't R2 always saving the day? He's pretty much the hero of Star Wars. I mean, without them, they would have died a million times over. So without R2, and maybe he's exaggerating, or maybe he really was just that awesome, and it was a humble brag. But yeah, really cool. Like I said, I'm taking it as canon until we hear otherwise. Will it make an appearance in the movie? I'm gonna say I doubt it, because it's so much farther in the future. But it's still something that's cool, a little piece of knowledge for you. Yeah, tell me what you guys think. Did you like learning a little bit more about the Whills and the mystery around that? Do you think it's something that can make its way into episode 9? What about holocrons? Are you hoping to learn more about those from the movies? Do you think that that's something we could get? Hope you guys liked a lot of the content we came up with this week. I found it really interesting. I've been learning a lot, so hope you guys did too, and hope you enjoyed diving into Star Wars with me and getting away from the real world for a little bit. So yeah, I'm thinking that's going to wrap us up here. Let me know once again if you have any questions. Please leave comments. Be sure once again to check us out on Instagram. That's where you can comment. Like I said, we put a lot of the comments into the actual podcast, because I love your comments. It's what it's all about, the discussion. So if you want to take part in these discussions, get on Instagram, get on Facebook, Reddit, check us out, leave comments. You might make it into the podcast. Give me your ideas, give me your theories. I love it all. I hope you guys have a great week. May the Force be with you. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Is your destiny.